So for those of you who have been to this symposium in the past, we've previously kicked off the day by going through the latest survey results from the Financial Wellbeing Employer Survey. Today, because of the schedule change, we're going to switch things up a little bit. I'm going to introduce some of the survey results that are directly relevant to this panel, and then if there's something that we missed, be patient, because Craig is probably going to cover it later in the day when he talks about some survey results that are relevant to his panel. So on the next slide, I'm just going to briefly give a quick overview of the Financial Wellbeing Employer Survey for those of you who are not familiar. It is a survey of 262 benefits decision makers that we interviewed or we surveyed between July and August this past year. The median time to completion was about 18 minutes. And in order for somebody to qualify to take the survey, they had to be employed full-time. They had to have at least a moderate amount of influence in their firm's employee benefits program. And they also had to have a job title like executive officer, HR manager, in the position of human resources, compensation, or finance. And we try to show some comparisons to years past. For those of you who are funders of the survey, you will know that we frequently change up questions to add questions that are relevant and take questions away that are less relevant. So there's not always a previous year's comparison, but we try to do that where applicable. Next slide. I'm going to start off with this one. This one seems kind of simple, and it is, but I like this one because it conveys succinctly a pretty important truth in financial wellness initiatives. And if I may be so bold, probably the reason that a lot of us are here today. So when we ask benefits decision makers, what when they're talking about their financial wellness initiatives, how do they conceptualize those benefits? Are they encompassing a broader range of benefits, or are they continuing to focus narrowly on the same range of topics that they have in the past? And overwhelmingly, benefits decision makers are responding that their financial wellness initiatives are encompassing a broader range of financial wellness benefits. And on the next slide, we see that reflected in areas of focus for benefits decision makers. Again, for those of you familiar, in the past, we've done this for 7 years now. In the first 5 years, saving for retirement was always the number one reason, their number one focus for financial wellness initiatives. And last year, for the first time, daily cost of living, high cost of living took over as the number one spot. This year, it's healthcare costs. If I'm up here presenting election returns, I'm going to say that these are too close to call, ranging from 29 to 32%. But the takeaway for me here is that companies are beyond, they're branching beyond just focusing on saving for retirement now. Companies are working on helping their employees save for healthcare costs, manage those costs, high cost of living because of above trend inflation over the past couple of years. And that's not to say that companies are neglecting retirement savings, because that's still really high up there on the list of concerns. But we also see things like helping workers manage debt a little bit less commonly. Next slide. This one is an open response question, so they're going to sum to more than 100%. But again, we see topics like helping workers with investments and retirement planning is the number one response. But we also see, again, that physical health and basic budgeting, savings, that sort of thing are very popular responses. Next slide. When we look at voluntary benefits, we do see that things like PTO, short-term and long-term disability are most commonly offered. But we are starting to see the emergence of some maybe boutique benefits. We do see things like lifestyle savings accounts have gained a little bit of a toehold. We also see ABLE accounts, and also, I like this one personally, pet insurance as becoming an increasingly commonly provided financial well-being benefit. And it remains to be seen whether these will eventually rise up to the same level as life insurance, PTO, that sort of thing. And that's one of the reasons that we do the survey, to track these things as they mature and develop over time. Next slide. One thing that is important to keep in mind is that financial wellness is this sort of squishy concept. Not everybody has the same definition, and why should they, right? Different employees are going to have different needs, and you're going to have to use different tools to address those different needs. And so we look at this slide right here that looks at the benefits offered, and then the share of people who offer those benefits considering it part of their financial wellness initiative. So we see here, health insurance, about 54% consider that part of their financial wellness benefits. And certainly there's a case we made either way, right? Some companies might view it as just table stakes to attract and retain talent. Other companies might view it as a way to help their employees manage their out-of-pocket healthcare spending, which has a direct impact on their financial wellness benefits or financial wellness. And there's a case to be made like that for each one of these benefits. And if I'm going a little bit fast, please forgive me, because I want to give enough time for our panelists to share their thoughts on these issues. I only have a few more slides to go. Next slide. We talk a little bit about the types of financial wellness benefits offered, but then also whether or not companies are planning to offer these in the short term. And we find that things like emergency savings funds, about a third of companies currently offer them, but 40% of the companies are looking to offer them in the near short term. Next slide. When it comes to things like personal finance benefits offered, we do see that companies are still very concerned with the impacts of inflation and helping workers manage day-to-day and cost of living expenses. We see that inflation-themed programming is still pretty high. The impact of inflation on retirement planning is about 44% of employers offer that. And we do see that when it comes to things like personalized financial coaching or planning, this is becoming an increasingly popular benefit for companies to offer, with another 30% looking to offer that in the short term. Next slide. We also see some newer developments made possible by some recent legislative changes. So with the Secure Act's $1,000 penalty-free withdrawal provision, we see that relatively few companies currently offer that, but 43% are looking to implement that in the short term. And again, we do see things like emergency savings accounts being very popular in terms of benefits that companies are planning to offer in the next 1 to 2 years. And then finally, this last slide, before I turn it over to my panel, we look at things like debt assistance programs and student loan assistance programs, and find that 75% of companies that offer debt assistance programs either offer or are planning to offer tuition reimbursement. And also, we find that 61% of companies that currently offer debt assistance are looking at specifically things like student loan matching contributions to 401ks, again, made possible by recent legislative changes. So with that context laid out, I'm going to introduce my panel, who are going to give their thoughts on the state of financial wellness initiatives, recent trends that they're seeing in the field, and their thoughts on these. So first, I'm going to introduce Sharon Carson, Executive Director. She is a retirement strategist at JP Morgan, the JP Morgan Asset Management Retirement Insights Strategy Team. She's one of the authors of JP Morgan's Guide to Retirement. And she develops and delivers retirement insights on topics such as Social Security, Medicare, elder care, and spending patterns in retirement. She has over 20 years of experience in various roles spanning in strategic planning, innovation, and program management. Down the line is Kirsten Hunter-Peterson. She is the Vice President of Workplace Thought Leadership for Fidelity Investments. In her current role, she studies employer, employee, and policy trends impacting workplace benefits and develop points of view on new and emerging benefits that address the needs of today's workforce. And finally, at the end, we have David C. John, who is a senior strategic policy advisor at the AARP Public Policy Institute, focusing on pension and retirement savings issues. The Public Policy Institute is AARP's internal think tank, and John is also a non-resident senior fellow in economic studies at the Brookings Institution, working with Retirement Security Project, which focuses on retirement savings in the United States, especially among moderate and low-income workers. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it off to Sharon.
Well, I'm really glad to see your survey results, because I think there's a lot of good news there. A lot of times we're so doom and gloom, and even I have some gloomy statistics too, but it's nice to see employers starting to think about these things and starting to take action on some of them. Even if they don't have the programs yet, they're looking to implement them. So we have some survey results. We can go to the next slide here. We have two parts that I'll cover quickly. One is a participant survey. The second one is just a summary of some joint work that we did with EBRI, particularly with Craig sitting down there, I see, the expert on a lot of this stuff. First, starting with our participant survey, We serve in that on the next slide. We use Greenwald, of course, highly respected in the industry, over 1,500 participants, weighted to look like people who have 401k plans. So that's our survey that we're starting with. Just a few results here. If you go to the next page, you'll see 85%. Now, we didn't define what financial wellness meant to the employees when we asked them this. So we just said, do you value financial wellness initiatives? And they could make up their own definition. But the vast majority, 85%, said, yes, we value this. And 72% said their workplace retirement plan was absolutely critical to their financial wellness of their household. And then 85% said, hey, those retirement benefits, I'm going to look to that. That's an important factor with staying with my employer or looking for a new employee. So it's kind of table stakes now, right? You need to offer that retirement plan to attract and retain those workers. So there's probably nothing too new there, but I thought it was interesting. A lot of them did say they like the financial wellness programs. They see them as valuable. And we asked them whether they really had them, their employer had them or not. If you go to the next slide, what are their top goals? Retirement is still number one. Now, it's less so for Gen Z. The youngest, as you went down in age, it became less relevant, right? But overall, 72%. So 7 in 10 said they could pick 3 goals. Retirement came out on top. I think for younger people, we need to do a better job of talking about it as financial freedom and flexibility, because retirement can seem so far away from them. I don't even know if I'd use, like, the word retirement is probably not that meaningful, but sort of financial independence probably means more. Paying off debt is up since our last survey in 2021, and the ability to pay bills is up. So more financial stress, that pandemic relief is starting to go away, right? Savings accounts built up in the pandemic. Actually, if you're steadily employed and people paid off their credit card debt, but savings balances are going back down and credit card debt's back up, is what we're seeing from our data. And then also emergency savings accounts are up there. And last is the saving for vacation or leisure activities. And speaking of how many lack emergency savings, which is one of the goals, if you go to the next slide, you'll see 4 in 10 lack the emergency savings. And even if they're worried about privacy, I guess Susie Orman had a good response. She had about 70%. So almost about the same number, 69, find it appealing. Of course, she said, if you have the match, that could help. And it could be a small, I think she mentioned a very small match, a very modest match. And I love the fact that she said, this is going to help them. And I've heard this too from other studies, not from our work, but if you get people started, they get that pride in it and they keep going and they want to do more. So the little match might get them interested, but then they want to see that build. It builds that confidence. So I thought I really loved that in her remark. And then we also saw really high interest in the next slide of interest in student loans, matching payment, so 66% interest there. So there are definitely things employers can do. And I hear from you that employers are starting to look at these programs, we think is great. Let's take a look at some of the joint work that we did with EBRI on what happens around specifically on the next slide with student loans and with emergency savings. We actually start with the emergency savings on the next page. This is a slide in our guide to retirement. We put a summary of the research in here. What happens if you don't, how often do you need emergency savings? And then what happens if you don't have it? So 9 in 10 have spending spikes, 20% or more greater than their income, greater than what they've spent. We said, what did you spend over the last year? And then every month. And then if you go 20% higher in a month, that's a spike. So 9 in 10 had spikes greater than their income, and 1 in 3 had spikes greater than their income and their savings. And this data was from the Chase anonymized and de-identified data, because we don't want to know who anybody is, paired with EBRI, and EBRI did the analysis. Craig did it because EBRI can't send their data to us. They can't send it anywhere. It has to be done at EBRI. So really clear about that. And then what happened? They increased their credit card debt. Half of them, and think about credit card interest and how devastating that is. They increased their credit card debt, almost half of them. They took a plan loan, almost 1 in 5. And a lot of them also decreased their contributions. And what we found a little bit deeper in the study that's not shown on this chart is they went to the credit card first. Once they started to use up their credit limit, it's probably easier, quicker, right? Then they hit the 401k loan. So really a terrible, terrible outcome, I would say. You know, plan loans, while they can be really useful and helpful to people if they have an emergency, realize if they leave that job, what are they gonna, a lot of employers don't let them pay it back. They have to pay it back all at once. And then they have the tax penalties on top of it. It's ugly. So you want to try to avoid that if you can. In the emergency savings account, we feel very strongly that's the place to do that. And the results are in the balances. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see the green is balances over $100,000. And the blue is the balances, the 401k balance under 20,000. This is with a similar income level and similar tenure. We did it for different income levels and different tenures, but you get more green with no credit card debt, higher balances with no credit card debt. Credit card debt significantly impacts, right, your 401k balance. So this is coming out. A lot of people, you know, we're talking about is emergency savings in the K plan going to take away from the 401k balance? I would say if you don't have it, it already is. So, you know, it's really critical here. And then the next piece we can talk about is the student loan debt. 1 in 3 increased their contributions when the student loan debt stopped. But what does that mean? 2 in 3 didn't. So could they use a little nudge to get going? If you have a student loan matching program, can you nudge them back into the 401k or increasing that contribution, right? 1 in 4 reduced contributions when student loan payments started. We also see this on the next slide in terms of balances, what happens, lower balances if you've got student loans than if you don't. This is by tenure. Also, and if we broke it into income 55,000 or more or less, the results were much more prominent for those with higher incomes. We think that's where a lot of the student loan debt is anyway. But that $18,000 for the younger tenured worker over their whole career could end up being $175,000 by the time that they are retired. So it could end up being very significant. So, you know, people need help with this as well. So that's what I'd have to say before I pass it back to
Excellent. Thank you
Jack.
for that. That's fascinating stuff. And I should take a moment here to just remind the audience that's listening online, please use the chat box if you have any questions for our panel. With that, I'm going to kick it over to, let's just go right down the line to Kirsten.
You both get points for slide speed, so we'll give the audience a break and just listen to me in the absence of slides. But good morning, everyone. My name is Kirsten Hunter-Peterson, and I'm a member of Fidelity's Workplace Thought Leadership Group. As Jake said, in my role, I study trends across the workplace, the workforce, public policy, and how all those trends impact employee benefits, financial wellness programs and initiatives being just one of those important benefits. At Fidelity, we have been very involved in financial wellness and financial well-being for quite some time now. And these two terms, I think, are often used interchangeably in the industry and in the market. So even though they go hand in hand, I did just want to start off by making a couple of nuanced distinctions. So when we think about financial wellness, it's really about that journey to financial independence. And that looks different for everyone. You know, that could be based on things like where you start on that journey or your money habits. Maybe it's the goals you have in life, financial or otherwise, or it could be life staged. You know, someone who's just coming out of college is maybe young and single is going to have a very different financial picture than someone who's maybe more senior in their career, is married, has a family, is thinking about sending those kids to college and hopefully preparing for retirement. So on that journey, it's really about whatever your goals are, having a plan in place to get you there, and then being able to pivot when unexpected things inevitably come up. I'll also mention that financial wellness happens to be the name of our holistic suite of support and resources and solutions designed to help employers help their employees build financial confidence and improve financial well-being. So that's financial wellness. And then if we pivot to more of the well-being side, financial well-being is really about how you feel about your money. That emotional component that Susie mentioned several times this morning. It's really a state of mind. So someone with high financial well-being probably has strong peace of mind that they are financially secure, whatever that security means to them or is important to them. We know there's been a lot of research done that high financial literacy is correlated with high financial well-being. And so at Fidelity, that's part of the reason why we emphasize with employees building financial knowledge, building financial confidence so that they can ultimately make more informed decisions about their money. So definitions aside, I also just wanted to note how financial wellness programs have evolved in recent years. I'm sure we'll get into a lot of the data here, but anecdotally, historically, employers were really interested in improving those retirement plan outcomes. In addition to retirement outcomes, thinking about offering their employees some additional education or assistance on topics like investing, for example. But we've come to find out more and more that there are a lot of folks out there who just aren't in a position to optimize those longer term goals right now. These are folks that really need more of the basics to support them. If we think about financial wellness as a journey of building a house, you need to have that foundation in order first. And so what comes into that foundation? It's things like making sure you're earning more than you're spending. We heard about that from Susie. Making ends meet, building a budget, understanding if you have that shock, do you have enough money to cover it? So saving for emergencies. And then it's also about understanding your debt picture. A lot of folks out there, especially in the US, have multiple debts. And so how can we understand what's in front of you, but then also pay it down most effectively and create a plan there? So employee needs vary. We all know this. Employers are tasked with really providing this very broad spectrum of help and designing programs that can meet the needs across that full spectrum. We've done a ton of research at Fidelity. We've had countless conversations over the years with employers and employees. And so I'm excited to share some of those more compelling insights today. And I look forward to our conversation.
Great. Thank you for that, Kirsten. David?
All right. We have, I'm not going to repeat what's already been said because it's been said very well. So I'm going to move into a slightly different tack. We have actually a couple of different projects ongoing at the moment. We did a major survey in what employees want in emergency savings in 2018. And we're about to go back into the field to redo that, to find out what features they value, how to talk to them about emergency savings and a variety of other things. I will say one thing though, that concerned me a little bit about Susie's presentation, which was are you sure this is really an emergency? One of the things we found, which is the strongest discouragement to any potential participant in an emergency savings plan is the potential that my employer knows what I'm doing. They know how much I've saved. They know what I'm using it for. They know when I use it. And I'm a little concerned that something like, is this really an emergency, may backfire to an extent. We also have a major project that we're doing with DeSia's Retirement Research Center. It's a twofold project. Project one, or step one, which is this 70-page report, which we're still in editing and probably will be in editing for a while at this rate, actually asked them to look at what the literature is. They looked at 90 industry studies and about 20 academic studies, as well as doing a variety of interviews with employers, providers, et cetera. And what we're coming down to in many cases is very similar to what the EBRI survey says and what you've heard already, but there are some disconnects also, and some rather serious disconnects. Just stage two is focus groups with savers or employees, and stage three, which will begin in a few weeks, is going to be another major survey asking people about their benefits and the like. Employers typically say, we're doing a great job in presenting benefits. Employees are not as certain that they are. And they're not that certain for a variety of reasons, which I'd like to touch on briefly. Number one, financial security, financial wellness is, as you've heard, an emotional concept. It's not numbers, it's what I feel inside. We have information showing, my colleague Manita Rao is a co-author of a paper showing that we see actually an improvement in productivity and the way people feel about themselves as employees with emergency savings and financial wellness benefits. And this tends to result in the fact that these are people who are more likely to be promoted and more likely to stay on the job. However, things that are getting in the way, language, location of the benefits, the structure of how we talk about certain benefits, and that's different from language. It is a natural human response that if you work with terms on a daily basis and your coworkers work with those terms, and some of your social contacts work with those terms, you assume that people know what they mean. And in finance, that's not true. And we're seeing that rather directly. Anecdotally, one of the DeSia researchers, Bailey Epperson, asked a variety of her younger friends the typical financial literacy questions. And as we often see, especially in younger people, they didn't do very well. So she went back and recast them in language that was terms that they were more likely to use. And lo and behold, when she asked questions that way, financial literacy actually went way up. Now, this was just a small sample of individuals, but one thing I would suggest is if our financial wellness benefits have been produced by people like us in this room and reviewed by HR professionals who deal with benefits on a regular basis, we may be actually completely missing what we're intending to do here. Number two is location. We see in the focus groups and the like that in many cases, people don't know that their employers offer these benefits in the first place. And if they do know that, they don't know where to find them. Now, again, it is a natural human response that if you deal with a website on a regular basis, you assume people understand that website. This has been my problem with dealing with IT people most of my career. When we set up our AARP emergency savings benefit, I asked our HR people, who are absolutely top rate and actually care about us rather than just going through the motions there, where do I find the sign up page? He said, oh, it's really easy. Just go to the same page where you do your payroll deductions and how you want your payroll designed. Well, I had last used that on April the 1st, 2013, when I signed up and went through my orientation session. I looked for an hour and called back and say, I have no idea where on God's green earth this is. So they sent me a link. And sure enough, if you looked at the link, you could find it very quickly. But if you can't find the benefits, essentially you're wasting your time. And we also see, incidentally, notifications. So we actually have a daily email that comes out to all AARP employees. And on a regular basis, they include a little thing there saying, hey, by the way, do you have emergency savings thing? Here's where you go to sign up. Except how many people actually read that? And I think that's actually another question. Now, we're also going to talk about structure of benefits, and in particular, the structure of emergency savings, but we'll do that later.
Thank you for your insights, David, and also Kirsten and Sharon too. So I'd like to remind the audience that's watching online to submit questions if you have anything that you would like to ask any of our panelists. So to sort of pick up where you left off with emergency savings, David, and also everybody, please feel free to jump in on this one. You know, we've seen increasing appetite for offering these sorts of accounts, this benefit. And also we've heard from Sharon that doing something like offering an employer match to the emergency savings fund can increase engagement. But what are the things can employers do? What should they be keeping in mind to increase and foster engagement with emergency savings accounts?
Oh, I thought you'd heard far more than you needed to from me, but there are things that they want. First thing off, when in our 2018 survey, and we anticipate similar returns there, when we asked people, do you want a payroll deduction emergency savings section? Answer was about 72% said yes. Then we asked the same question, would you want this if there was an employer incentive? And the answer, including the 80-some% of those who had previously said no, was about 86%. Yes, I want such a benefit. And we figure 14% didn't understand the question. So that's number one. The incentive actually does have a use. Number two, I want the ability to add or subtract, meaning change my payroll deduction at will. Number three, I don't want my blasted employer to know what I'm doing. It's my business. It's being used in a campaign at the moment. Then, do you care about what percentage goes in? 1, 2, 3, etc.? No. Do you care about whether this money is invested or not? No. What about automatic enrollment? And we kind of broke even there because I'm afraid the way we structured the question, people didn't know what automatic enrollment was. But the people want and use this. And one of the things that I think is crucial, and I'm talking far too much, is in retirement savings, we look at how much you have. In emergency savings, that doesn't matter. What matters is, did you use it? And then can you replenish it?
I think we have a question in the audience there.
Hi, Martha King. I have a question, and maybe you guys will get to it, so I'll just put it out there. Obviously, these programs all sound like very needed, very desired, but employer uptake, cost to employers, as somebody who has sat on the benefits committee for my prior employer, obviously understanding all the puts and takes financially and impact to employer costs. So that's the question broadly. What are you guys hearing out in the world as you're talking to employers about these kinds of ideas? Because we've talked a lot about potentially matching in some form on emergency savings, on student loan debt repayment, childcare benefits, et cetera. Thank you.
I think anytime you have to go to your senior leaders and advocate for a new benefit spend, a new budget item, it's stressful and it's an uphill battle. So I think the more those of us in this room can identify and research better outcomes of these programs, the easier it will be for you to then advocate for them. I do think we're probably at the beginning stages still of emergency savings programs, how they're helping people, what the program design looks like. And of course, it's going to differ workforce to workforce and employee to employee. So that creates additional challenges, particularly for service providers and employers. But the outcomes that I think we're all very optimistic about and are beginning to see even in a very short window of user data is really promising.
Yeah, I think a couple of things. One, you see they want their employees to be prepared for retirement. So when they're ready to retire, they can leave. So I think that's one. For the emergency savings, at least some of the programs I've read about, the matches don't have to be very big. I think I read about one that was like $100 per employee. They were putting in $19 a paycheck, right? It was like pretty modest. And three, if your employee is financially precarious and worried about their finances, what impact is that going to have on their job and how they do their job? And there's some academic research out there on that, and it is not pretty, right? So I think that's huge, right? You want your employees to be focused on their work while they're working, not worried about can I get to work if I get a flat tire, right? So I think that's really could help you make your case.
So we have a good question from an online participant that's sort of in that same vein. Employees say that they want financial wellness, but then they might not actually make use of those benefits. What sort of things can employers do to increase the ROI, the increased engagement with those benefits?
Well, when it comes to benefits engagement, I think one of the biggest challenges is that people are just busy, right? At Fidelity, we have wonderful in-house behavioral scientists, and they're constantly talking to us about cognitive load and how that impacts engagement. So, I know when I open my phone, I have texts, I have 3 personal emails, I have work email, I have Teams, I probably have voicemails from my frankly older family members. When I'm overwhelmed by all that noise, all those notifications, at least my reaction, maybe some of you are similar, is to put the phone down and walk away. I do not want to engage. So I compare that a lot of times with personal finance challenges or even financial wellness benefits that are designed to help us. When we feel stressed and overwhelmed, we check out. So just that cognitive load problem is really significant. But some of the principles to help are offering the right benefits, making sure that you're actually offering benefits that are resonating with your particular workforce. And again, that's going to look different employer to employer, industry to industry, and even employee to employee. And then the experience of actually finding the benefits, using the benefits, benefiting from the benefits. You really need to offer a multi-dimensional experience. It has to be simple, to your point about the website. The more personal and tailored to the individual it can be, the better, because you're getting right to the point. And then through a variety of different channels as well. So in person, virtual, and all of the kind of subsets that go under that. But it's not just about format and channel, it's also getting to the point, being concise, educating someone on the problem, and then giving them actionable next steps and solutions to move forward.
One of the things that employees say is, I need guidance. I need guidance more or less individually. We know that we don't have enough financial advisors as it is. And frankly, most of them are involved with people who have somewhat higher incomes due to the fact that it gives them somewhat higher incomes. So this may be an area where AI comes in. And it may well be that this is something that can be dealt with there. Now, another thing, though, is, as you just pointed out, I had some conversations. We had some construction in our neighborhood, continuing construction in our neighborhood. And I went and talked to the construction workers about financial wellness, because I was actually very curious about that. And I got, first off, the same response. At the end of the day, I'm tired, I'm going home, I'm going to eat, and I'm going to sit in front of a TV set or something along that line. I don't have a laptop on my bulldozer, which we both agreed was a good idea not to have. And therefore, I can only look at these benefits when I get home. Now, one of the things that I've found just looking at various financial wellness platforms is that they tend to be set up so that you're using a laptop. And that does not work when you use a phone. And things need to be formatted for what your workers can do. And last but not least, you don't want to accidentally discourage your workers. One of the biggest problems I see, or one of the big problems I see with emergency savings is that if you look at the response of, well, how much do I need? The response is, well, you need about 3 months worth of earnings. And when we've talked to typical workers, that response gets you, well, there's no way I'm going to do that, so why should I even waste my time trying? 3 months is something that you see typically in financial advisors, and it conflates two different risks. Risk number one is I'm going to lose my job. If I lose my job, I probably need 3 months worth of savings. If I have a car tire or a medical copay or something along that line, I need probably closer to 4 weeks, maybe a month's worth of emergency savings. And that will take care of that. And that also doesn't discourage your workforce at the same time.
We found something a little bit different than that, but it's still less than the 3 to 6 months.
Yeah.
We looked at the Chase data and actually how much people were, their spikes and how much they needed to cover. And at the financial planner community would say not just 3 months, but 3 to 6. Like it's really, if you think about 3 to 6 months, that's definitely, I agree in principle with you, that can be way overwhelming and you don't want to discourage people. So we found more like 2 to 3 months of net pay for most workers is what they need to cover the expenses. But the same thing, like don't discourage people though. Right?
And I think that gets into the emotional side of it too. Just using myself as an example, I'm an extremely risk averse person from a financial standpoint. And so what I need set aside for emergencies, I know is a lot more than probably the average person. So whether it's the risk of losing a job or the risk of, having your tire fall off your car on your way to work, it's also a very, very personal and emotional decision that I think needs to be taken into account in the planning process. We have found that, similar to what David said, that starting with $1,000, especially for people who have nothing, is a tremendous starting point to get people motivated because it feels much more attainable and achievable than that 3 to 6 months, which frankly can be $20,000 or $30,000 for folks. That feels like a huge number because it is a huge number. So starting off small, whether it's $25 a week, as Susie said, or $50 a week, or even $5 a week, getting people into the habit of saving for these nearer term expenses is and should be the goal. And actually, can I go back to something you said about the construction on your street? I'm teeing up some research that we just did with SHRM. It was published yesterday, I believe. but talking about the experience employers are offering with their benefits to their employees and the difficulty of reaching certain workers. Done some new research on what we call deskless workers, so people who don't sit in front of a computer like someone like I do every day. This is 70 to 80% of the global workforce. We often don't talk about this cohort of workers, but they are the vast majority out there. They are construction workers, nurses, first responders, baristas, flight attendants. They're not just not, pulling a laptop on top of a bulldozer all day, but many of them don't even have access to their phones during the day. So they're going home, they're spending time with their family, they're trying to relax, and benefits are just not top of mind whatsoever. But what we found in this research is that HR leaders are saying that this group is much more difficult to reach, period. And then also with their benefits, they find that deskless workers have far less engagement with their benefits than their counterparts. I don't know what we would call counterparts, desk-bound workers. So if you're interested in that, the Fidelity and SHRM research was just published yesterday, so go check it out.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to be Googling that one later. Thank you for that. So we have another fantastic question coming in from online. When it comes to voluntary benefits, some of them can be wholly paid for by the employee, some of them are wholly paid for by the employer, some of them are a mix of the two. Do any of you have any perspectives on service models that are more or less effective? Do any of you have any perspectives on how employees engage with those benefits, depending on who's paying for them?
I think we have a chart as to how that's divided up, but as I recall, most employers pay for at least part of the benefit, if not all of it.
Yeah, that's consistent with what we found in our survey.
Yeah.
But in terms of specific benefits, does engagement increase when employers pay the full freight? Our sort of economics training would seem to indicate that, yeah, obviously when people don't have to pay anything, people consume more of a thing. But do we actually see that in real life?
Typically in many areas, if you don't have skin in the game, you may consume, but you may also ignore because you don't necessarily value it.
I would agree with that. I think from the employee perspective, what is the value of a benefit where there isn't some sort of cost sharing? We are currently conducting some research on benefit quality, and in some of the qualitative data, we spoke with employees. Many of them expressed something that frankly we hadn't heard before with respect to benefits, which is, does my employer care? So if you are offering a retirement plan, that employer is paying for the administration fee and other fees. But what the employee sees is that they may or may not be getting a match. What is the level of that contribution? And so, from where the employee sits, that level of care or that level of quality really makes a difference in terms of how they perceive the benefit and therefore their relationship with their employer.
So Sharon, sort of tying in on that, I remember from one of your slides that 85% of workers were attracted to an employer because of their retirement plan. Or that was a 85% reported that was a good reason to stay or go to a new employer. What sort of things that, I know we've been talking a lot about how employers are moving away from retirement plans. So what are some things that employers can do to actually make that their retirement plans more attractive and actually use that as an attraction tool for prospective employees?
I think a lot of the things that we've already been talking about here. I mean, certainly auto programs have come a long way. I mean, we're moving the needle, just moving it along with, the auto enrollment and then the auto escalation and the re-enrollment. And I think a lot of plan sponsors they've bought into that, or the market is there, right? So then we see, that even having a plan, we forget, a lot of people don't even have a plan. And because a lot of it, we're working with employers in this room who are providing plans, but there's population out there who don't have plans. So what about improving the access for them? Some of the state mandates have started to move there. And that is not only increased like those IRA balances and those state plans, it spurred sales of private plans to small employers, because a lot of times it's the small employers that may have not completely gone in with all the auto programs. They also may not even offer a plan. But when the state starts a mandate, they start looking, well, do I want the state mandate or do I want a different type of plan that I can get? And do they even know about the tax credits, right? So I think access is huge. And then just, I don't want to repeat too much, the accessibility of the desk worker versus the non-desk worker, and making it easier in the financial language. So I think a lot of it's already, like what you have already said, is I would completely agree with, for the people who already have the plans.
Thank you. And I have a million questions that I want to ask the panel, but I just want to make sure that nobody else in the audience. Oh, here, we have one here.
Thanks. My name is Chris. I'm from the Rhino Foods Foundation. I have a question about any trends you're seeing. So we're talking a lot about emergency savings benefits, a little more of a proactive benefit. Have you guys seen any more reactive type benefits where somebody runs into a financial emergency before there's a base of emergency savings that could pose a threat to staying employed or financial insecurity coming in? Are there any trends in the market? I know you talked a little bit about 34% of companies are starting to look at emergency loan products or other things like that, but I'm just curious if there are things popping up that are not in the predatory side of like turning to payday lending or even earned wage access, or things that could be short-term fixes but are pushing away from long-term impact. Just curious if you've seen anything pop up.
Just what I read in the newspaper, and I think you do need to, you mentioned predatory, right? So I did read about one that kind of made me a little cringe, so I think you do need to be careful with that, with those types of programs. But, you read about employers making, their payday, you can get paid early if you need to, type of thing, right? So is that what? Yeah.
All right, so I think we have time for one more question. I saw one. Rodney.
There we go. Oh. So I have a quick question. It's great that employers have finally gotten the message, what employees have been saying in recent years, that we're concerned more about those near-term financial needs rather than the long-term financial needs, which employers have been focused on for so long, like retirement. But people are working longer and living longer. Also, when we think about disability, where according to the Social Security Administration, 1 out of 4 people in their 20s today will have to retire early due to a disability. So I want to ask, how are you advising your clients, your plan sponsors, on striking that balance between addressing the near-term needs of employees while still making sure that they are prepared for those eventualities down the line of working longer and possibly becoming disabled?
I have an answer, but you hit on something I feel so strongly about, which is, I think a lot of major employers have the disability insurance, and they don't really encourage their employees to take it or think about it. They might have the employees like, oh, the accidental death and dismemberment is cheap, I'll take that. Right? But how many of that, there's a reason why that's cheap. It's because nobody uses it, right? Like nobody needs it. And it's like, what would happen if they don't understand? What would happen if you couldn't go to work? Are you dependent on your own income? For the vast majority of people, unless they can depend on mom and dad, like they are dependent on their family, and they are dependent on their own income. I mean, I'm like, So in our guide to retirement, we have called out on one of the pages, like, it's financial freedom and then consider disability insurance because of what's in the retirement confidence survey, which is a lot of people end up retiring before they plan because of health and disability, exactly what you said. So I'm actually really glad you brought that up.
I would add that, we continue to prioritize and emphasize savings in a retirement plan in addition to the shorter term needs. You still need to have something to retire on, especially if you have to retire early, which we know, 30 to 50% of people do. As we see a lot of more mature workers who are more senior in their career begin to retire, more and more people are doing that every day. And we're coming to a generation that has largely saved in a DC plan versus getting a pension or a DB distribution. And so one of the most popular financial wellness benefits that we are seeing right now and hearing about from both employees and employers is around retirement income options. And how do they actually develop and distribute a stream of income from that DC plan in retirement? And also keeping in mind things like healthcare costs in retirement, which historically has not been part of many people's financial planning, but we come to find out that it's their biggest expense in retirement. So whether that's thinking about savings options like NHSA, or just keeping that a part of the conversation when you're thinking about what those retirement income options and streams look like, that's very top of mind for employers right now.
And we hear from employers on a regular basis, well, if I offer these short-term products, et cetera, doesn't that take away from retirement savings? The answer is really probably not. As a matter of fact, the UK had a couple of experiments that were done using the National Employment Savings Trust, NEST. And in their case, they found virtually no change in the amount that people were saving for retirement. Now, part of that was a requirement that the government had, but there have been US studies also that show that people understand that they need to do both. I will also say, however, that I think the biggest challenge we have going forward for an older workforce is going to be what happens when you reach retirement. And how do you take that lump sum of money and actually convert it into a relatively stable income process? We see this across the world. Australia's got a new mandate that they've just imposed in there. It's a massive discussion across most of Europe at this point. But that's something that we ignore as a financial wellness benefit to our detriment, because that really, among other things, is going to be the one that enables our workforce to move on and give younger people their spots, if in some cases.
I'd love to keep this conversation going for like another 3 hours, but I think in the interest of my continued employment with EBRI, I'm gonna have to bring this panel to a close. So thank you for my panelists, and please join me in thanking the contributions everybody's done.